While no taxes on tips nor on overtime from Donald Trump may help many Americans with the current high cost of living, many other Americans don't receive tips on the job and don't work at an hourly rate. Are there any blanket policies that would help Americans as a whole deal with the currently higher cost of living?
Absolutely. And in fact, Trump needs to go a lot farther with this. No taxes on tips might have been a lucky strike for Donald Trump, since this election will likely come down to Nevada, even more specifically Las Vegas, where most people work for tips. That's why Kamala Harris was so quickly to steal that policy, because they're well aware that Las Vegas could end up deciding this election the way the Electoral College might go. No, I think it's pretty clear. And again, this isn't a Republican thing. This isn't a Democrat thing. This isn't a conservative, liberal, left, right. This should be all Americans. Everybody should agree with what I'm about to say. By the time it's all said and done, we're taxed at about a 30% rate. By the time we buy things, sell things, spend things, earn money, whatever it is, you're taxed at about a 30% rate. That is astronomical, okay? What we need to do is a flat tax, and I would just say just a sales tax, and that's it. We should have no income tax, no federal income tax, no state income tax, no tax on tips. You should be able to make a transaction without the government getting involved 5 times, reaching into your pocket and shaking you down like the mafia that it is. So if we need tax for certain things in civilization, we can have a small sales tax, and that would be more than enough to still pay for the roads, the police officers, and everything else. It would be more than enough. Yeah, we might not be able to afford all the wars overseas. Yeah, we might not be able to give Ukraine $200 billion and Israel $10 billion every time they come to Washington, D.C. Yeah, we might not be able to afford that. Oh, well, I think the American people will be able to get over that, quite frankly. So no, I don't think it goes far enough. And this whole concept that I always hear these talking points from the left. Oh, the rich don't pay their fair share. Well, what is the fair share? What is the fair share from the rich? They already pay the most in taxes by far. The rich pay 90% of the taxes, but this is still solved with a flat sales tax, because who's going to be taxed more on a flat sales tax? The rich. Who's going to be buying a yacht? The rich. Who's going to be buying a skyscraper? The rich. Who's going to be buying a jet? The rich. So it really knocks out all the problems. It takes care of the left wanting the rich to pay more taxes because they buy more things, spend more money, and it gets the government out of the middleman and the middle class and the lower classes' lives, where we're not spending as much on taxes either. So it's a nice policy to get a talking point started. It's a nice policy that could end up determining the results of this election, but this is beyond party lines. We are taxed way too much. We need to cut taxes down to almost nothing. And by the way, for all these people that want more government services and all this thing, why don't they just volunteer to pay more taxes? I'm sure the IRS would take your check, but I noticed that all the people that want more taxes, they never volunteer to pay more taxes. They want somebody else to pay those taxes, not themselves. Somebody else has to pay those taxes. So I'm not going to do the class warfare crap. Every single American should be upset at how much we get taxed. We used to throw tea in the Boston Harbor for a 2% tax. Now we tax about 30% of the money that we make and spend. It's over the top. It's out of control. We need to cut this thing down. And Trump just going after tips, payroll, and all the other things he's mentioned. I think Social Security, yeah, that's a nice start. Let's keep going. Let's keep cutting. And cut the government down about 98% too, and you won't need all these taxes.
Thank you. We'll kick it over to Stephen for his 3-minute response.
So the unfortunate reality... Can you hear me? Yeah, so I mean, like, if you have no understanding of economics, I guess we can say that a flat tax is a good idea. Allow me to introduce a very simple concept. It's called marginal utility, okay? What does marginal utility mean? It means that the next dollar that you have means a little bit less to you than the one that you had before. So what does that mean? Well, if you go to somebody that makes $40,000 a year and you say, hey, give me $5,000, that $5,000 from that person means a whole lot more than you go to a person that makes $500,000 a year and say, hey, give me $5,000, because the marginal utility of the next dollar that you earn is less and less and less. Once you're making past 7 figures, you might not even miss $10 or $20 or $30,000 missing in your account, because who keeps track of it? Whereas when you're poor, or when you're working poor, or when you're lower middle class, or even middle class, you do notice when there's an extra few $100s that go to a tax, an expense, whether it's childcare, whether it's whatever else. These are costs that everybody has to deal with. In order for our society to function, in order to support the successful businesses and billionaires that that we have in our society, some level of redistribution is probably required. Probably doesn't work when you have a society with some people that make billions of dollars, whether that's in the appreciation of assets or whether that's through W-2 wages or whatever, right? Millions of dollars through W-2s, right? And then you have a bunch of people that can barely afford to live in the cities that they are working for these people in. When I stream my stuff on Twitch or if I stream my stuff on YouTube, I'm not just relying on my stream and the people watching me. I'm not even just relying on the engineers that keep all of that infrastructure working. I'm also relying on the people that keep the buildings clean. I'm relying on the people that work as baristas and servers that serve the people food that might work in these downtown areas. I'm relying on the bus drivers. I'm relying on the emergency medical services. There's a whole chain of people that exist that make it so that I can do my job that I think it's okay to pay into. And anybody that's in America, a country that allows you to be the best version of yourself more than any other country in the world, I think that when you live in this country, I think that you also do owe a debt to it. And you owe a debt to the people that work in this country and keep it running. And the idea that somebody making over $1 million a year can't pay a little bit more in taxes to keep that country functioning is absurd to me. And then this idea of, oh, well, if you think it's so important, then why don't you just pay more taxes? If there's a stone in the middle of the room and it takes 10 of us to lift it, and there's one guy saying like, hey, we should go lift the stone, you say like, oh, well, why don't you go lift it on your own? It doesn't make any sense, right? A few people saying, okay, well, fine, I'll pay more in federal income taxes doesn't really do anything for the country. This idea of the citation to the Boston Tea Party is hilarious, given that MAGA people are some of the least constitutionally respecting people in the history of the United States, whose president literally said he would terminate the Constitution because he wanted to go and find voter fraud. A guy who, given a softball question by Sean Hannity, asking him, hey, when you were talking about what you would do in office, that was a joke, right? And he's like, it was a joke, except on day one, I will be a dictator, okay? This is the guy that you're going to talk about and then bring up the Boston Tea Party. Also, the Boston Tea Party didn't happen because of no taxation. It happened because of no taxation without representation. The second part is important. We can consent to being taxed. We can vote on politicians that do taxes. We can vote on politicians that do spending. If you want to do something about the level of taxation as well, you have to pair it with budget cuts. This idea that Donald Trump is, again, the guy that is going to help you because he's going to cut taxes, where are the budget cuts? What are you actually cutting from the budget? And keep in mind as well that on the federal spending, 25% of this is in our discretionary spending. So when you're crying so much about, oh, foreign aid to Ukraine, which again, you haven't addressed, but it's like 20 billion in cash, not 200, okay? The rest is usually in the form of old armaments, so we have to pay to upkeep anyway. Where was the spending cuts from Donald Trump? They didn't exist. So what, are we just going to continue to deficit spend 75%?
We have to move. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Can I get a quick rebuttal? Have a quick rebuttal?
The open dialogue.
First of all, what cities are so expensive to live in? Democrat-run cities. And again, he talks about redistribution.
Is this the open?
You talk about redistribution
Wait,
again.
when those cities are expensive, do you acknowledge that those cities produce more economic output for the country than all the red cities? This is what I mean when I say these people don't live in reality. But like, why can't you acknowledge that? Because you'll very quickly say things like, oh, well, there are more homicides in Chicago. Yeah, there's more people that live in Chicago. And Chicago is what makes Illinois all its money. That's where the money comes from, or the blue cities. It's not just blue states that subsidize the existence of red states, which is true. And by the way, all of those governors were so happy for the American Rescue Plan when Biden was there to hand out money to shore up their budgets. But then when you want to talk about expenses and living and all these other things, now you want to talk about how blue cities need to be held responsible, but you don't give them credit for the economic output? It's insane.
It's a nice deflection. So Democrat cities are the most expensive to live in, so I'm glad you at least acknowledge that. And again,
more expensive to live in the U.S. than Uganda as well, right? It is, right?
So you can always volunteer to pay more, all right? If you want to redistribute wealth, you can be the hero, man. You can empty your bank account right now, but I bet you don't. I bet you're actually living pretty rich. I bet you do pretty well. And you want to bring up the Constitution. The Constitution actually states when the United States government becomes corrupt, it's our duty to reform the government. That's actually
what article
in the
clause is
Constitution.
that? Is to terminate,
Second
suspend
of all,
the rules
you can
of
read it
Constitution?
again.
Which Constitution are we talking about?
We live in a constitutional republic. We don't live in a democracy.
What is the contradiction there? What do you think? Hold on. What is a republic and what is a democracy?
A democracy is where a bunch of lunatics like you can vote away my rights. A democracy is where 3 wolves and a sheep vote what's for dinner.
Is that Article 5 or Article 6? I don't know what part of the Constitution.
So you asked what a democracy
was.
was.
So a democracy is when multiple people vote. A republic is when you have representatives that do things for you. We are a representative democracy. That's why we're a constitutional republic. We are both a republic, which just means you're not a monarchy, and a democracy. This idea that we must be a republic because I'm a Republican and we're not a democracy because you're a Democrat is fucking retarded. Come on.
So again.
I appreciate that, Destiny.
All right, bye.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.